Ladies and gentlemen, MrCropper here.
Let us first divide cognition into rational analysis and sensory perception, which Descartes considered valueless. Now reason gives us concepts which are true but tautological. Sensation gives us images
Whose content is phenomenal. Oh, you want some phenomenal content? Ladies and gentlemen, I'll give you some phenomenal content. Now, this is some good stuff we're doing here, isn't it? This is a better understanding of Immanuel Kant than you'll get in any philosophy class in any stupid college or university nowadays. They're so social justice warrior obsessed, altruism, anti-reason. You're never going to understand Kant the way we are simply by reading him. And this is a salient thing when if you go and watch any of these videos about Immanuel Kant by various professors, they explain Kant. They stand up at the front of their room and they explain this, and they explain that, and they explain the other, and they don't give lengthy quotes. And lengthy quotes are the real deal. In fact, MrCropper is doing one of the most lengthy quotes of Kant that I'm aware of. Verbatim, starting at page 1, paragraph 1. Alright. Now, I started this video over a couple of times this morning because this must be a bunch of pollen in the air or something. My sinuses are going a little whack, so excuse me if I sniffle a little bit. This sentence, this paragraph here, is giving me some trouble. I started and read through this blue down to here. I stopped here. Excuse me. And I said, okay, well, what's going on here? And I started over and read it again. And I started over and I read it again. I started over and I read it again. I said, what the hell is going on here? So finally I just ignored it and I continued to the end of the paragraph down, this stuff down here. And that's when it clarified for me. Now don't skip ahead and read without me unless you want to. The positive value of the critical principles of pure reason in relation to the conception of God and of the simple nature of the soul admits of a similar exemplification. Just continuing what he was talking about from above, we're not too worried about it. On this point I shall not dwell. See, we're not too worried about it. But if you look at that sentence, why does he not want to dwell on it? The positive value of the critical principles of nonsense in relation to the conception of nonsense and of the simple nature of nonsense admits of a similar exemplification. Why will he not dwell on nonsense related to nonsense related to nonsense? Because that would be crazy. And he knows it too. Continuing, I cannot even make the assumptions, as the practical interests of morality require, of God, freedom, and immortality, if I do not deprive speculative reason of its pretensions to transcendent insight. So we have to deprive speculative reason of its pretensions to transcendent insight in order that we may make the assumption of God, freedom, and immortality. And that's required for the practical interests of morality. Okay? Now, we have to deprive speculative reason. Now, speculative from specie meaning an instance or a category in the real world. So it must mean, speculative reason must be referring to objects in the real world. Speculation about real objects, right? Now, speculating about real objects has pretensions to transcendent insight. But they're just pretensions, okay? The form of reason which thinks about objects in the real world really cannot transcend, okay? And the practical interests of God, freedom, and immortality require us to make this assumption All right, see how messy this is? This is crazy, right? That sentence right there makes like pretzel claims that refer back and forth. That's a crazy sentence, right? So I was trying to iron that out. For to arrive at these, it must make use of principles which in fact extend only to the objects of possible experience. What other objects are there? And which cannot be applied to objects beyond this sphere without converting them into phenomenon. Now, what objects are beyond what sphere such that they'd have to be converted into phenomena in order to be dealt with? So where are these objects? What are they? The only objects that we know are phenomenal objects, right? So he's talking about noumenal objects, and he's talking about the nature of them and talking about... Alright, so you see how floaty this is getting. This is getting pretty crazy. And thus rendering the practical extension of pure reason impossible. Well, that is quite a claim. The practical extension of pure reason impossible. Now, I don't know what pure reason is. It's just nonsense, right? Pure reason is reason about things without sense. So, the practical extension of pure reason is impossible. Now, what is practical? What is practical? That means to be able to practice it. And what does extension mean? Alright, so what does all this mean? What does he even mean by all this? Okay. I must, therefore, abolish knowledge to make room for belief. Oh, is that what all that stuff was? I must abolish knowledge to make room for belief. Amazing. The dogmatism of metaphysics, that is, the presumption that it is possible to advance in metaphysics without previous criticism, is the true source of the unbelief, always dogmatic, which mitigates against morality. Now, I have to say that is a brazen claim which belongs at the beginning of a paragraph, not at the end, and especially not at the end of a paragraph to which it seems to be basically unrelated. But this paragraph is an utter mess. He said, gobbledygook nonsense, blah, blah, blah. I must therefore abolish knowledge to make room for belief. Excuse me. Now, what did he do up there then? I must therefore. So he said something up there which sets the grounds. All this up here sets the grounds for a therefore. Now, what could he possibly prove which would say, we have no knowledge, we have only beliefs? So this up here posits knowledge about our knowledge, right? This up here posits some sort of understanding about our means of knowledge or knowledge as such. And what he's saying is, whatever he posits up here, he can therefore claim that if we are going to have belief, we cannot have knowledge. There is only belief. That is all we have is belief. We do not have knowledge. Now I'll leave it to you, ladies and gentlemen, whether or not he's claiming knowledge. Thus, while it may be no very difficult task to bequeath a legacy to posterity in the shape of a system of metaphysics constructed in accordance with the critique of pure reason, it may be no very difficult task. Still, the value of such a bequest is not to be depreciated. In other words, this might not be very hard for us to sit in an armchair and just make up a bunch of nonsense. But what we're doing is extremely valuable. Do not depreciate this. Do not deprecate. It will render an important service to reason by substituting the certainty of scientific method for that random groping after results without the guidance of principles which has hitherto characterized the pursuit of metaphysical studies. Now, to what extent is he right? I mean, he's right to the extent that some preacher sits somewhere in his armchair making up nonsense. Groping for results without the guidance of principles, which has hitherto characterized the pursuit of metaphysical studies. Now, how does Immanuel Kant differ from that tradition? Well, he just went absolute full throttle. He took the governor off the engine, and he is just going absolutely full throttle, balls to the walls. That's the only difference between him and these people who grope after results without the guidance of principles. They, at least, took some, principle that Kant would dismiss as not a principle. Something that he would say, well, you're not fundamental, you need to look a little deeper or something. And they were using those things. He's going to look deeper. They thought they had some guiding principle, whoever these people are, that were groping after results without the guidance of principles. They were misintegrated. They had some form of principle, though. Kant's principle is to dispose of principles. Now, how is that better than what they were doing? It's worse. It's worse or the same. It's the same. Or possibly worse. But it's no better. He's not making an improvement. So this critique of pure reason will render an important service to reason by substituting the certainty of scientific method. Okay, so he is going to bring the certainty of scientific method into it. So now we see over and over again he makes these brazen claims, like he's the new Copernicus and stuff. So somebody who has no idea what's going on, they can't think for themselves, they're studying Kant because they believe Kant is important, and they read that little bit right there, they're going to underline that. And they're going to say, oh, well now see here, Immanuel Kant is giving us the certainty of the scientific method. Because that's what he's claiming right there. He says that he's going to substitute the certainty of the scientific method for these people who are groping after guidance without principles. Ignoring the fact that he himself is throwing principles out. How could he ever have a scientific method after he's made the claim that we cannot have knowledge, we only have beliefs? These aren't separated in different books. They're separated by a matter of sentences, 2-3 sentences. They're separated. Now, what kind of an idiotic moron can read this stuff and not see the contradiction glaring at you right there? We can have no knowledge. This is scientific certain method that I'm giving you. That's obscene. Immanuel Kant's one of the most obscene, terrible people in the history of the world. Okay. It will render an important service to the inquiring mind of youth. Oh my God, it will wreck the minds of youth. And it is. It's destroying the minds of youth today. And an important service to the inquiring minds of youth by leading the student to apply his powers to the cultivation of genuine science. See, Immanuel Kant's after genuine science. We can have no knowledge. This is genuine science. We can have no knowledge. This is genuine science. Instead of wasting them, as at present, on speculations which can never lead to any result. Immanuel Kant, isn't that what you're doing by divorcing the reason of the mind from evidence of the senses? You cannot ever have any result. Immanuel Kant is in fact engaged in an idle attempt to invent new ideas and opinions. And here he is criticizing other people who are also doing that. There's the pot calling the kettle black. This is whistling in the graveyard, right? This is him saying, look at all these stupid people doing these terrible things, and he's giving you a list of the things he is doing. Okay, but above all, it will confer an inestimable benefit on morality and religion. Now that's what he's really after, to save faith, right? Negate knowledge in order to save faith. That's what he's really after. That's why he says above all. So that at least is true. So it's going to have an inestimable benefit on morality and religion by showing that all the objections urged against them may be silenced forever by the Socratic method. That is to say, by proving the ignorance of the objector. For as the world has never been, and no doubt never will be, without a system of metaphysics of one kind or another, it is the highest and weightiest concern of philosophy to render it powerless for harm by closing up the sources of error. That's an admirable thing if you were to do such a thing, but it's terrifying that he is supplanting a system of science with a system of error. He is not closing up the sources of error. He is closing up mankind inside of a bag of errors. For as the world has never been and no doubt never will be without a system of metaphysics. All right, true there. Anytime you wake up and open your eyes, you're going to have metaphysics, whether you change them every minute or take them for granted or understand them, sure, of one kind or another. It is the highest and weightiest concern of philosophy to render it powerless for harm. Metaphysics can never be rendered powerless for harm. You can have a proper metaphysics, which will help you in reality, or you can have a disastrous metaphysics, which will hurt you in reality. But powerless for harm is a bizarre thing to apply to metaphysics. Now, how will we make it powerless for harm? By closing up the sources of error. What are the sources of error? The belief that we can have knowledge. So, if we stop believing we can have knowledge, then our systems of metaphysics will no longer be harmful to us. So, the guy who invented Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany says that if we use his system, we will come to no harm. Philosophy will no longer be harmful to us. Isn't that terrifying? Isn't that utterly terrifying? Alright, next paragraph's a big one. I'm going to draw a line here. If you appreciate what I do, please patronize me. We will continue with this. Let's see, I got to go pick my daughter up at the airport tomorrow, so probably Friday or Saturday will be the next one you can expect. And I don't know who else, I don't know who to debate and stuff. I don't know who to go after next. So if you want to leave some ideas in the comments, that would be great too. And thank you for joining me. It's been Mr. Cropper with Immanuel Kant. Join me again next time. Mr. Cropper out.